Books for Schnooks. 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 Books for Schnooks.
The Hobyahs. Now, this is a larger book than usual, and the reason is because this was meant to be read to a large group, like a class or something like that. And so it's so big on purpose so that it's easier to see the illustrations. Okay, let's start. Here's the title page. The Hobyahs. Retold by Brenda Parks and Judith Smith, illustrated by Rodney McCrae. The verso page is in the back, so I can tell you that this story was first printed in the year 1987, and there is not any dedication, so we can start. Once upon a time, there was an old man, an old woman, a tiny little girl, and their dog, little dog Turpie. They lived in a house made of sticks near a deep, dark, damp swamp. Out in the deep, dark, damp swamp lived some Hobyahs. One night, when the old man and the old woman and the tiny little girl were asleep, the Hobyahs came, creeping on their toes and their knees, came the slimy, slippery Hobyahs. Creeping with their Hobyah machine, came the slimy, slippery Hobyahs. As they came, they whispered, "Tear down the house. Tie up the old man. Tie up the old woman. Then we'll put the little girl in our Hobyah machine." But little dog Turpie heard the Hobyahs creeping, whispering, and slithering through the mangroves. He barked and barked and barked. The Hobyahs were scared, and they ran back into the swamp. But the old man tossed and turned in his bed and said, "Little dog Turpie barks so loud he disturbs my sleep. Tomorrow night I'll shut him in a barrel." And he did. That night, when the moon rose, the Hobyahs came again, creeping on their toes and their knees, came the slimy, slippery Hobyahs. Creeping with their Hobyah machine, came the slimy, slippery Hobyahs. As they came, they whispered, "Tear down the house. Tie up the old man. Tie up the old woman. Then we'll put the little girl in our Hobyah machine." But little dog Turpie heard the Hobyahs creeping, whispering, and slithering through the mangroves. He rocked the barrel backwards and forwards, until it fell over and broke. He rushed out of the barrel and he chased the Hobyahs into the swamp. But the old man tossed and turned in his bed and said, "Little dog Turpie barks so loud he disturbs my sleep. Tomorrow night I'll tie him up in a sack." And he did. The very next night, when the moon rose, the Hobyahs came again, creeping on their toes and their knees, came the slimy, slippery Hobyahs. Creep, creep, creeping with their Hobyah machine came the slimy, slippery Hobyahs. As they came, they whispered, "Tear down the house. Heh, heh, heh. Tie up the old man. Heh, heh, heh. Tie up the old woman. Heh, heh, heh. Then we'll put the little girl in our Hobyah machine." But little dog Turpy heard the Hobyahs creeping, whispering, and slithering through the mangroves. He wriggled and jiggled, but he couldn't get out of the sack. The Hobyahs poked him with their long, skinny fingers. Heh, heh, heh. Gleefully, the Hobyahs tore down the stick house. They tied up the old man. They tied up the old woman. Then they put the little girl in their Hobyah machine. They took the little girl into the deep, dark, damp swamp. When the Hobyahs were back in the swamp, they danced around the machine singing, "Hobyahs, Hobyahs, we're slimy and green. We've got the tiny girl in our Hobyah machine." They danced and sang until the sun came up. Then they lay down and went to sleep. Meanwhile, little dog Turpy wriggled and wriggled in the sack. At last he wriggled free. He ran over to the old man and old woman. He bit through the string that tied them up. When they were free, they patted and hugged little dog Turpy. "Good dog," they said. "Now please help us find our little girl." Little dog Turpy sniffed for the Hobyahs' tracks. He led the old man and the old woman through the mangroves. By and by they heard snoring coming from a hole in a log. They crept up and looked inside. And there were the Hobyahs, fast asleep. The little girl was sobbing in the Hobyah machine. Quickly and quietly, the old man opened the machine and let the tiny girl out. Then little dog Turpy jumped into the machine. He lay very still and waited. That night when the moon came up, the Hobyahs woke. They danced around the Hobyah machine singing, "Hobyahs, Hobyahs, we're slimy and green. We've got the tiny girl in our Hobyah machine." Then they opened the door. Out jumped little dog Turpy. He chased the Hobyahs through the deep, dark, damp swamp. He chased them over the mountains and far away, and the Hobyahs never came back again. Then little dog Turpy went home for dinner. Now on the back cover, there are little Hobyah eyes, just like on the front cover. Little Hobyah eye. Actually, they're pretty big because this is a pretty big sized book. But that is the end of the book.